Hey guys, Daniel here. This is another video, and in this video, I'm actually joined by the legendary Andy Diggle. For those who don't know, Andy's a writer known for his work in comics such as The Losers, Green Arrow, Year One, Hellblazer, James Bond, Snapshot, Ratcatcher, Daredevil, Swamp Thing, and only another million more. Batman, Adam Strange, Control, Thunderbolts, Uncanny, Doctor Who, and he was also previously the editor of 2000 AD, aka the Mighty Targ. But he's very kindly agreed to come on for an interview and let me annoy him for the next hour or so. But Andy, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for having me.
It's no problem.
Excited to be here.
You can see that he's a bit starstruck to be in the presence of a huge celebrity such as myself. You had to take a minute there. But so I assume it's a nice day over in England. The weather's good.
It has been nice the past couple of days, but right now it's all grey and overcast. The sun is just kind of setting behind my back hedge, so you'll probably gradually see me getting darker through the course of the interview.
Oh, of course. It's been sunny here in Ireland for the last few days. I was sunburned, so what better way to spend it than sitting here talking to you about comics? But so many different questions. So the first question I want to ask is, how did you get into comics?
I think I've always been into comics. I've got two older brothers, and so I used to read the stuff that they would have lying around. I guess when I was very small, there was always like the Beano in the house and Asterix books. And those are probably the first stuff I read. This would be back in the 70s because I'm like super old.
Oh, yeah, a million years ago, of course.
Yeah, back when dinosaurs walked the earth. And then I guess I sort of, then I would start reading things like Commando Picture Library, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't discover 2000 AD when it first came out. I was a bit late to that party. I didn't discover it until about it was Prog 210. I remember that one, Brian Bolland cover. I think that was like 80 or 81, probably 81, I think it was. And it completely blew my head off. It was amazing, and I didn't know at the time that it was kind of like the golden age of 2000 AD kind of thing. But like looking back, you can see that it was like it was a real peak of quality around that time. But yeah, and I just got completely hooked. I just for me, there was nothing else like it.
Yeah, and so growing up, were you just a fan of 2000 AD, or was there any other comics?
That was the main thing I was into comics-wise. I mean, I'd occasionally read, war comics and stuff, but nothing I kind of collected on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And then one thing I remember, I guess it was probably about 83. We were on my mum was driving me up the motorway to see my grandparents up in County Durham. We stopped off at a motorway service station, and she said, yeah, you can buy a magazine or a comic or whatever. And issue maybe 9, it was the Warrior magazine. And it was the issue with the V for Vendetta mask on the black background hanging on the front. I didn't know what it was, but I picked it up and flicked through it. And it was, again, I recognized some of the art styles in there because I recognized Steve Dillon's work from 2000 AD. And I was like, well, this looks interesting. I'll check it out. And just read it in the car driving up the M6, and that was amazing. And so that led me to go and track down more copies of Warrior. I really like the fact that it was kind of not really suitable for kids. I think I was probably about sort of 12 or 13 or something at the time. And that kind of that very much appealed to me. And then a couple of years later, when I was about 15, I never had any interest in American comics, particularly as a kid. I wasn't really into superheroes, so I just didn't really look at them. But I was in the newsagents paying my parents' newspaper bill, and they had a big stack of American comics on the counter. And the top comic was Swamp Thing. And it was the Alan Moore run. I didn't know who Alan Moore was back then because I was an idiot. But it was like this kind of big swamp monster standing on top of a dead dinosaur, and in the background was like Batman and Hawkman. Wow. But the comic was called Swamp Thing. It's like Batman's playing second fiddle to a monster. I don't know what the hell this is, but it looks cool. So I just kind of bought it on a whim, and it was amazing. I had no idea it was written by this guy who was also writing like Halo Jones and DR and Quinch in 2000 AD. I hadn't put it together, but I loved it. And it had John Constantine in it. It was the first time I ever saw Constantine. I was like, I don't know who this chain-smoking English bloke is in this comic, but he's being sarcastic to Batman. I like that energy. I need more of this. So yeah, and that's what led me to go to sort of find my way up into London to find Forbidden Planet when it was still just a little backstreet shop, Denmark Street. And it was the first time I ever went looking for back issues and sort of discovered this Aladdin's Cave of amazing comics. So over the next sort of weeks and months, me and my friend would sort of hop on the train, go to London, and just do the tour of all the comic shops in central London, like Gosh and Comic Showcase and FP, just tracking down back issues of Swamp Thing. And then whilst wandering around in there, I discovered like European graphic novels and stuff like that, or epic when Marvel were doing these epic graphic novels like Star Slammers and stuff like that. So yeah, I didn't really have any particular taste. It wasn't particularly I was gravitating to, you know, Marvel or DC or something like that. It was more that I would just kind of wander around and grab. Mostly I would pick up stuff because I like the artwork. You know, there's a lot of really nice European stuff I picked up. I couldn't read half of it because it was in French or whatever. But yeah, just amazing, you know, like Mobius type stuff, you know. So yeah, so it was a bit of an odd route into comics. Usually it's, you know, people like, oh, they discovered Batman and followed Batman or something like that. But with me, it was kind of pick and mix, you know. It was lots of different influences. But it was, I think that's healthy, you know, rather than just, you know, I think it's probably because I've got the attention span of a goldfish. I don't like reading the same thing all the time. I don't want to necessarily keep following the same character for years. It's more that I would just grab whatever tickled my fancy at the time.
Yeah.
And obviously my tastes kind of evolved and matured a bit over the years, but that's what got me started. And you can see a through line from 2000 AD to Warrior to Swamp Thing to what became Vertigo. You know, I was kind of like their issue 1 for Hellblazer and stuff like that. And then when they created Vertigo, that was very much my jam at the time. Like the 90s Vertigo was kind of, that was felt like comics that were written and drawn just for me.
Yeah.
You know? And it was a shame to see Vertigo go, but you know, markets change, whatever. Yeah. So I guess that's a slightly long-winded answer to how I got into comics.
It's no problem at all, and that was really interesting. But you, of course, brought up 2000 AD there, which you inevitably went on to work at. But what were some of your favorite 2000 AD stories? You know, Strontium Dog, DR and Quinch, or?
Well, you've got to love Dredd. I mean, everybody loves Dredd,
Yeah.
especially that early 80s stuff. That's got a very special place in my heart. But yeah, and I've always been a big fan of Strontium Dog. That was when I first started reading 2000 AD, in I guess like 80 or 81, I can't remember the year. But it was in the middle of the origin story of Johnny Alpha when he was still a teenager. It was the mutant uprising, you know, Portrait of a Mutant. And I didn't know that Johnny Alpha was a bounty hunter. I didn't know he had this partner called Wolf Sternhammer. I didn't know any of that stuff. It was because I picked it up mid-story. So it was just this story about this teenager in this mutant war. And I loved it. And then at the end of the story, when he's like 30 years old and he's got this partner with a weird accent and he's hunting his dad. And I'm like, wait, what? He's a bounty hunter now? So that was a kind of like a bit of a kind of tire screech kind of thing for me. And then, but I'd grown up watching like spaghetti westerns, you know, a big fan of like Sergio Leone and those kind of stuff, those kind of films. And then once I carried on reading, oh, it's that in space. It was like very much my thing, you know. So yeah, and I've always liked stories about underdogs. You know, I like underdog heroes. Yeah, probably another reason why I never got super into superheroes as a kid. But Johnny Alpha was very much that kind of underdog kind of character. I like that kind of stoic quality. You know, it had this kind of crazy sense of humor combined with that very kind of grim, tough guy sort of, you know, boy's own adventure thing, which I think, you know, John Wagner and Alan Grant, they're the masters of that kind of, that combination of like sort of grim seriousness and absurd comedy. You know, it's kind of a very special flavor. Not everybody can do that. So yeah, so I think probably Strunt. I should say Dredd because Dredd is so influential and it's so amazing. But on a personal level, I just really like Johnny Alpha. You know, I like Strunt. And funnily enough, I've just managed to pick up a whole pile of the big old collections that they used to put out of the Strontium Dog stuff. Yeah, Pirate 2080 was getting rid of some of his collection. I was like, well, I'll have those.
Oh yeah,
because they're really expensive if you try and hunt them down secondhand now. These are the out of print versions, you know. So yeah, I'm still missing volume 3. I had a look on eBay and that's going for like 65 quid or something. I'm like, maybe I'll wait till the price comes down.
Did you pull the editor card? Like, oh, I'm a previous editor. Does that
Don't you know who I am?
Does
yeah, nobody cares. No. X-Dogs get no respect. It doesn't work that way, sadly.
Disgraceful. You can just pull that card in almost everything. I'd imagine like in your daily life that helps you out loads.
Please tell that to my wife.
You're at the shop. Do you know who I am? I'm the X-Targ. So it's this discount price. But you know, so of course, how did 2000 AD actually come about for you as a job?
That was an odd one. I kind of got into it a bit by accident, really. I guess I went from being a comic reader to I studied comics as part of my degree dissertation. I did my degree dissertation was on comics storytelling techniques. And then I went back to that same uni to teach a course on comics that they started doing after I left. And then I started, like, while I was working at some office job, I kind of started running my own little, like a website, like a little sort of web zine, I guess. And this would be kind of around 1996, something like that. And it was kind of the early days of the web, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was just an excuse to interview cool people, basically, like in comics. And yeah, like one of the people I'd interviewed had mentioned that he'd heard there was a job going at 2000 AD in the editorial office.
Ah.
So based on that tip, I kind of, bought the Guardian and looked through the jobs section, the kind of media jobs section, and there it was. They were advertising for it. So yeah, so I applied for it and went through various rounds of interviews. Got interviewed by David Bishop and Steve McManus, and I ended up getting the job. It was originally it was the office assistant. It wasn't even the assistant editor. It was basically the office dog's body, doing the photocopying and basic stuff like that, opening the mail. But I think it was probably my dissertation that got me the job. There were probably lots of people who would have been better in the job than I was, but the fact that I'd actually kind of I think the fact that I'd studied it from the inside out rather than the outside in, lots of kind of, especially back then, because we're talking about back in the 90s.
A million years ago, of course.
Yeah. And I think I was kind of interested in how comics were made and what techniques the creators used, rather than looking in from the outside, where it's kind of talking about the cultural impact or whatever it was, which is kind of how media studies was teaching it back in the day. It was not, they didn't, and I think David and Steve probably liked the fact I was bringing a slightly more practical eye to the way I was looking at comics. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and I guess I stuck around long enough to sort of inherit the title. I guess I was there for a total of about 4 years, but yeah, I got promoted eventually to assistant editor, and David started to let me take more control over commissioning stories rather than just kind of helping out. And eventually, he decided it was time for him to move on, which was around about the same time that Rebellion were bought 2000 AD. They'd been in negotiations with Egmont for I think a year. I don't know exactly how long, because editorial weren't involved in those discussions, so I don't really know what happened behind the scenes. But as it worked, I don't know whether David timed his departure to coincide with Rebellion actually purchasing 2000 AD. It would make sense. But that's how it happened. So I basically became editor at the same time as the Kingsley brothers bought it and basically saved it. They saved it because Egmont Fleetway had no idea what to do with 2000 AD. They didn't understand it. And I think they were frankly happy to see us go. So it was, interesting times.
Yeah, and so as editor, it's like being a writer is one thing, but then being an editor, there's a certain sense of responsibility. So was there a difference for you kind of adjusting to being an editor?
Well, I wasn't a writer before that. I'd interviewed lots and lots of comic writers and artists because I wanted to learn how to write comics well. Again, it was that kind of practical approach. I wanted to learn how to do it, but there weren't really any books on the subject. There weren't courses. I mean, now you can do courses on comics writing, but back then, comics the Marvel way, and that was basically it. There was like a dread script in one of the old annuals that shows you what a script looked like. But there wasn't much out there. So I had been in the process of putting together some pitches for 2000 AD when I heard there was this job going. So I hadn't even got around to submitting any of my own pitches. But that was my plan was to try and get a job writing for 2000 AD. But as it happened, I ended up working there anyway. But it was the best possible training, because once I was in the office, even though I wasn't their boss or anything, but I'm working with these, like this huge history of amazing writers and artists at 2008, the guys who'd inspired me to love comics in the first place. So it was the best possible training school. You get to see what the script looks like when it comes in, and then you get to see what the artist, how the artist puts it together, and then you see what works and what doesn't when it comes to actually, lettering it. Sometimes you'd have to, balloons would have to be moved around because the panel placement doesn't work or whatever. So it was that very, very practical, hands-on kind of training, which was great because it was you couldn't like I say, there weren't courses for that kind of thing, but it was also slightly scary because I had no idea what I was doing, and it's on the job training is what they called it. What that actually means is we're going to drop you in the deep end and you'd better learn to swim fast, you know. So I basically asked lots of questions, you know, like me and David Bishop often had there's sometimes a bit of friction between us, you know. We could both be quite abrasive, and I think we kind of bumped each other up the wrong way sometimes. But I would ask a lot of questions, and he would always stop and take the time to answer my stupid questions, you know. So I kind of gradually figured out what the hell I was doing. But it's because I was young and stupid, and I thought I knew everything when actually I didn't. But at the same time, I knew that I didn't know anything about the logistics of publishing. You know, I kind of felt like I had I know what I like, and I know what I had a very strong sense of what feels like it belongs or doesn't belong in 2000 AD, and a sense of story, or I think I thought I had a sense of story, what works and what doesn't. But that's not the same as understanding distribution and, you know, how to produce a PDF and all the kind of, you know, the actual practical mechanical side of putting things together. So yeah, it was a real learning curve for me, but it was an exciting time.
Yeah, and so did you feel like a certain sense of responsibility, like a bit of pressure, because you're the editor, so it's kind of up to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, when I became the editor, absolutely a huge responsibility, and it was quite stressful actually, because it wasn't just the weight of responsibility. You know, I didn't want to be the guy who messed it up and got it cancelled. You know, which was a genuine fear, or had been, especially when it was under Egmont. It was also because the Rebellion buyout meant that we were kind of looking for an office, because we would have to leave the shared offices of Egmont and find somewhere else. So, you know, me and Matt Smith were kind of like having to wander around the streets of London, checking out various offices to see what would work, at the same time as putting together the weekly comic, at the same time as having just lost the backup of having an entire international publishing company working for us, you know, because at Egmont, of course, they've got people who deal with, you know, distribution and pre-press and all that kind of stuff. And suddenly those resources aren't really there anymore. So it was a lot. It was very stressful. But things settled down in the end. And I think to be fair, it was a learning curve for Rebellion as well, because they were new to this, you know, they were new to publishing a weekly comic. And I wasn't really in a very good position to, you know, give them lots of practical advice on distribution and stuff like that, because I don't know anything about that stuff. That's never been part of my job, you know. So I kind of paddling as frantically as we could to try and keep our heads above water, but things eventually settled down into a bit more of an even keel.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here's a question I ask all of my 2080 guests: if you could see two 2080 characters fight, who would it be? It's just a fanboy question, but it's like you get the best answers here. I got answers from Rob Williams, Steve McManus, Jake Lynch. So what's your response? What two 2080 characters would you like to see fight?
I would pit Old One Eye against Doug Pocock, the former marketing manager of Egmont Fleetway.
just those. You know, you're not going to follow up. It's just out there. Those two.
I don't know. I don't really think of it in these terms. It's not like superheroes, action figures getting mashed together.
Now you see, this is how I do it. You know, obviously I'm up for editor. I have to respectfully decline because I come up with these brilliant ideas here. But, you know,
I'll tell you. Shaco versus Toby the robot dog from Halo Jones.
That's a good lineup there. Yeah, that could go either way. Who's your money on?
I think probably Shaco. He's got the weight advantage, you know. I mean, yeah, Toby's got the teeth, but Shaco's got like sheer muscle mass. I don't know. It'll be a bloody fight, I think.
Yeah, if it's bare knuckle boxing, it goes to Shaco, but could go either way. But actually, so I'll just take a minute while we're talking about 2080. Top had this shirt. I actually got this shirt from Paul Trimble. Everyone, make sure to go check out Enniskillen Comic Fest and OMAC Comic Fest. He gave this to me because I'm a huge star, and he was overwhelmed by my brilliance. But yeah, no, make sure to go check them out. But yeah, no. So another question I want to ask: what happened after 2080? What came next?
For me, what jobs-wise, you mean?
Yeah.
What did I do? I'd already started applying for writing jobs because as me and David were kind of getting ready to transition he was transitioning away from 2080. We kind of swapped jobs. I'd already taken over editing the magazine. while he was editing 2000 AD. And then when he left, we kind of swapped jobs. I took on 2000 AD, but he edited the magazine as a freelance editor. And I'd already written the first Lenny Zero story for the magazine. I wrote it for free as a way of saving some money off the budget, so we could pay a big name artist to do a cover. And that's how. So it was basically, it was like 10. It saved me the budget for 10 pages of script, which otherwise I would have had to pay to somebody else. So I just so then I put that towards hiring a big artist for the 10th anniversary issue of the magazine. This was, but because the readers had responded quite well to that story that we published, the first Lenny Zero. It's the first time I worked with Jock, which was beginning of a beautiful friendship. But yeah, so like after we swapped jobs, David was happy to commission more Lenny Zero, which was that probably my first paid job, I think, in comics. I think was this the second Lenny Zero story that after I'd gone freelance. So that was my homework to actually figure out my own career, shouldn't I, before I did this interview? I've got such a terrible memory.
It's no problem. It could be anything.
And I guess Snow Tiger was one of the first things I wrote as well. Matt commissioned that from me. And it was around about that time or soon after doing those things that I started thinking, well, I wanted to apply to Vertigo. I mean, me and Jock, we both really wanted to do Hellblazer. We're both huge Constantine fans. And we just thought that we should like, we seriously considered just doing like a 6-page short Constantine, like beginning, middle, end, paying a letterer to letter it for us, and then just sending it to Vertigo as a sort of calling card, saying gives a job. But in the end, I got a good tip off Garth Ennis.
Oh, no way.
We were talking about like who the good people to work for were, and he said, you should send your stuff to Will Dennis at Vertigo, and that was like the best tip anybody's ever given me. So I sent Will. I mean, Will's a great guy, but I didn't know him back then, and I think he probably had not been there at DC for long anyway at that point. But I sent him, I think, the first Lenny Zero story, and basically said, I'd love to do Hellblazer, but I'm nobody, or I'd like to pitch you some create your own things, whatever, like what's good. And he wrote me a very nice letter back, or email, I can't remember, saying that, he liked Lenny. He couldn't commission a creator-owned book off me because I'm nobody, fair enough. But that, he'd keep me in mind for other stuff because I think he liked the fact that Lenny didn't feel like a lot of the other stuff that they were doing at the time. There was a lot of kind of post-Swamp Thing, post-Sandman kind of stuff. But like Lenny had more of that kind of sort of tough guy vibe to it. I guess it was probably more 100 bullets than Sandman, if you know what I mean. And I think that's more Will's style, which is why Garth was right to suggest I contact him in the first place. Yeah, and that eventually led to Will commissioning Lady Constantine from me.
Wow.
Which was that 4-issue mini I did with Goran Sudzuka, which was a lot of fun to do. And that was my first American job. So it was, whenever people get asked how you get into the comics industry, everybody's always got a different version. There is no one right way to do it. Everybody's got a different path. And mine's a particularly weird one because starting off as an editor is like an editorial assistant anyway. It's kind of an odd way in, but it was very helpful for me to learn all of that practical side of it rather than having to make all my mistakes in public. You know what I mean? Which I'm glad I didn't have to do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you just brought up working with Jock there, and another comic you got to work with Jock on was Green Arrow or Green Arrow Year One. So what was that like? How did that come about?
That came about because I guess I've been doing all this stuff with Will and Karen Berger at Vertigo, which I loved. And I was kind of like, well, I'm in the American comics industry now. Americans love superheroes. That's what it's all about. These it's Marvel and DC basically, especially back then. So I guess we're talking about 2002, 2003 when I was kind of thinking about all this stuff. And so I just thought, well, I should really try and write a superhero comic, because The Losers was great fun and it had a bit of a cult following, but cult following means, there's only a few people who like it, but they really like it. But the sales were never stellar, So I thought I need to write something that's actually gonna get some more eyes on it. And so I actually got sent, I can't remember, a DC encyclopedia of all the characters. Because the thing about superhero comics is that there's you know, the fans love the continuity. You know, they love knowing all of these complicated histories and stuff. But I didn't know any of that stuff. I would jumping into other people's continuities. I kind of like, my brain doesn't quite gel with them very well. So I looked through this encyclopedia, just kind of flicking through it, thinking, well, trying to find a take, as they call it, you know, like an angle, a hook that I could hang a story on. I'm not one of those guys who can just kind of jump in there and wing it. I kind of need to know in advance what my sort of angle of approach, my angle of attack is going to be. So I just kind of browsed through the thing, and I don't think I'd ever read a Green Arrow comic in my life. I'd sort of read Green Arrow was one of the team, but in terms of just straight Green Arrow, I don't think I ever had. I'd seen the Longbow Hunters, and remember thinking it looked cool, but hadn't actually read it yet. But it was in the DC Encyclopedia. I saw the entry, and it just mentioned, you know, Oliver Queen was strapped on this island and had to sort of fight bad guys and then escape. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. What issue was that in? And so I started researching it, and because I wanted to see how that story had been told in the past, because I thought, well, maybe I could retell that. And it had just been done a couple of times as like sort of one-page flashbacks kind of thing, and it was really super basic. And I think in the Longbow Hunters, it kind of like that retconned it anyway, and ended up being like there was just a couple of stoners on the beach kind of thing. You know, there wasn't really it was a funny undercutting of the legend, you know. But I like, you can probably tell from my stuff that, you know, I like kind of grounded but intense, gritty action thrillery type stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Know, rather than everybody flying around and zapping laser beams at each other. You know, I think action is more. I think action should be scary, and it's only scary if it's grounded. So I wanted to bring that approach to it. I wanted it to feel more like, you know, First Blood than than a superhero thing. And it just occurred to me that, well, that's it. My brain kind of lit up. Like, I've got an angle. Nobody else is doing, you know, superhero comics, certainly mainstream superhero comics in that style. And this story is perfect for me because it would inherently have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, it's not like an endless ongoing continuity soap opera. It's the story of how he got off that island. You know, and again, like in terms of story structure, I tend to think very, you know, traditionally, very sort of 3-act structure kind of thing. And it just kind of like, it was one of those things where I can just see it. I can see it in my head. I know how to do this, you know, and I think DC initially wanted somebody else to draw it, but me and Jock had become kind of like good friends by this point, and we were kind of like, yeah, no, Jock's going to do it. It's going to be fine. And DC kept trying to kind of suggest other people who they thought would be more traditional superhero art style.
Yeah.
It was one of the American shows. I can't remember if it was New York or San Diego, but basically I was going to go and talk to Dan DiDio about just kind of locking this down. It wasn't called Year One at the time. I was just pitched it as, I had a generic subtitle. It's like Green Arrow, Law of the Jungle, or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But like I was meant to meet Dan DiDio on the con floor just to kind of like, you know, finalize things. And Jock, you know, me and Jock were together at the show, and I was like, he was like, you know, I'll come with you. Yeah, like, yeah, you come with me. And we just kind of presented ourselves together to Dan DiDio, saying, we are going to do this book together. And he didn't want to say no to our faces, because, you know, Dan likes, if he's going to stab you, it's going to be in the back, not the front, you know. So it was very much, it's kind of, oh yeah, sure, go, what the hell, yeah, and sort of handshakes and everything. So like, there we go, did it. Yeah, we just basically fronted it out, and it worked, you know. But I remember warning Jock. I said, like, mate, like, you know, 5 issues of this is a guy running around a jungle. You are going to go insane. How many leaves are you going to have to draw? You know, like how much jungle? I'd like, because I can't imagine. I mean, I don't like, for me, creating art is like magic. I don't know how artists do it, you know, because they start with a blank sheet of paper and then they make something beautiful appear. It's like creating something amazing out of nothing. And I can see it in my head, but I can't imagine actually doing all that work and make it look that beautiful. But I remember warning him, it's like, you're going to go insane drawing so many leaves, right? I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And he was, because, you know, artists don't like being told to draw like, you know, 2 armies on horseback colliding kind of thing, because it's like really hard to draw. And I assumed that, you know, jungle would be like that. And he was like, no, it's fine. I've got a shorthand, you know. Like, really? And then when I finally saw him, you know, doing it, and it's kind of like, you know, he'll just kind of quickly brush 3 lines, and then he'll get like an inky brush and just kind of like splat it a bit at the top of the lines, and like boom, suddenly you've got a jungle. It's like they're palm trees. It's like, and it's like the sort of implication of Jungle. You know, the sort of suggestion there. It's rather than, you know, drawing everything in laborious detail, and it looks beautiful, you know, and it's got that lovely kind of organic kind of quality to it. I think
Yeah.
a lot of I think probably one of the things that put me off American comics, at least superhero comics, when I was a kid, was that there was a very uniform kind of art style, and which I found a little bit lifeless and a little bit plasticky, maybe. I think probably because I, you know, having grown up with all these European artists who were working on 2000 AD or, you know, British war comics and stuff, they had a much more kind of rough and ready, organic kind of quality to their art. Carlos Esguerra and these kind of guys, you know, and that always feels more alive to me, I think, than the very clean, sterile kind of line art. So yeah, but that style of Jocks really suits the story. We wanted to do something gritty and grounded, and so that art style, I think, is a perfect match for it. And it just worked. And I knew when I was writing it that this, you know, this is working. Most of the time that doesn't happen with me. Most of the time when I'm writing, it's like pulling teeth, and I hate my own work, and I can't bear to look at it. And that's why I'm so slow. You know, it's not because I'm agonizing over finding the perfect word like Shakespeare. It's because, oh my God, I hate my job. I hate my writing. And it just takes me forever. But sometimes my brain just lights up like a pinball machine, and I'm just flying, and because I know it's working. And when I was doing Green Arrow, I knew it was working. And it's what, you know, it's like putting a comic together is a big machine with lots of moving parts, and I'm just one cog, you know. But that on Green Arrow, like the machine worked perfectly. You know, everybody just meshed, and it was, yeah, it worked. I wish it was always like that, you know. I wish it was always as satisfying as that.
Yeah.
But you know, and it was nice because it was kind of felt like a bit of a vindication in that I knew it was working when I was doing it, and then. And it was like still probably the most popular thing I've ever written. And it's like I can tell when I'm on form, and I can tell when I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not able to just flip a switch and make myself always on form. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's tough.
It is so. And so, like, you've obviously, that Arrow story went on to be very iconic, and actually season 1 of the TV show Arrow adapted it in with the whole island thing. And, you know, forgive my repeating nature, but of course one of the characters is actually named after you, and you must get this question all of that. You can see it in your eyes, like, okay, yeah. But actually a character was named after you, David Diggle, I believe. So
John Diggle.
Oh, John Diggle, that's right. Yeah, the actor's
like by David Ramsey.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Mark Guggenheim is said, yeah, like that character's named after me. It's very nice to have a little hat tip like that in the show. It's very flattering. What Mark didn't know when he named that character was that I do in fact have a brother called John.
Wow.
So my brother, John Diggle, who is not at all nerdy or geeky as I am, now has like a John Diggle action figure. But I don't have an anti-Diggle action figure. I should totally get myself one of those.
Did he have an action figure that?
Well, he should. If he doesn't, then we should petition for one.
Of course, this will go out to millions. So this will obviously help. You know, millions watch my YouTube channel. So basically, you're on the right track there. But yeah, get an Andy Diggle action figure. Despite the fact that he was an evil twin brother, he's still awesome. So just put that out there. But yeah, no. So another character, Andy Diggle, his brother, was actually, it's your name. So what was that like? Is that a bit like, okay, every time I Google myself, Andy Diggle is there?
Oh, I don't Google myself. No, I'm not one for vanity Googling. Once I did have to Google myself because I thought somebody was speaking ill of me on the internet. So I had to kind of do a quick Google to find out what are they saying about me. And it was just some jerks that I don't need to worry about, but it was fine. But all of the like a lot of the searches came up as the TV show guy. So it's like we used to be the only Diggles in town. You know, they used to we grew up in South London, and there were like no other Diggles in the phone book. You know, phone books were a thing we had back then. And now there's the TV character, but I've moved up north now. I'm in Lancashire now, and there's Diggles everywhere. It's a town up, I think, in Yorkshire, Diggle. But there's a coffee shop in town called Diggles. So I go in there and get my coffee, and it's got Diggles written on the side of it, so everybody knows it's mine.
Oh, of course, it has to be. You just show your name. Hello, it's me, former Targ, here to get my coffee. Or, you know, do you not play that card? You would think you'd use that every day.
They would actually just probably call social services at that point, I think.
Yeah, of course. You have to call the police, you know. But that's it. So another comic got to working with Jock was called The Losers. Now, I'm going to annoy you about The Losers all the time, but so how did The Losers come about?
How did it come about? Good.
It's probably a million years ago.
Yeah, I remember. It was when I was talking to Will, because we'd done Lady Constantine together. And I'd originally pitched him a couple of ideas that were sort of crime inspired kind of things. I really liked Johnny Double, which Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso had done, because that felt like a breath of fresh air at Vertigo. It was just pure crime, no supernatural, no horror. And I wanted to do something in a similar vein. I was a big fan of like Elmore Leonard novels, and I wanted to do something that had that slightly kind of like, a little bit too cool for school kind of vibe. That would just be like really entertaining, but just so slightly not as grim as Azzarello's stuff, I guess. I mean, he's got a very sly sense of humor, but it's a very black sense of humor. I want to do something that's a bit more pop. But again, still, I couldn't do something creator owned. So me and Will, we just agreed, well, let's find some old character that's forgotten and revamp them, because I actually really enjoyed that process of like trying to reboot things. I prefer that actually to just taking the reins and carrying on with something. So we kind of looked around trying to find something. I mean, Johnny Double was a character from like a showcase comic or something, apparently. I don't know, I haven't read it. But we searched trying to find characters to reboot, and I kind of drew a blank. And then one evening, in fact, Will rang up and said, "Have you heard of this book called The Losers?" And I said, "No, but it's a great title." Yeah. I really like that title. Like I say, I like underdog heroes, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like perfect fit, they're literally called The Losers. So he suggested rebooting this old World War II comic called The Losers. Like, there was no brief, he wasn't like, we need this, we need that. He was just like, have a brainstorm, see what you come up with. And it went through many different iterations. I think originally what I pitched was like a mini series that was with the original World War II team, and had them reuniting in the 50s after the war to do a kind of Rat Pack caper kind of thing. They were going to have to go and kidnap a Nazi rocket scientist from Los Alamos, and because he knew where there was a stash of hidden Nazi gold in Europe. So it was going to be that kind of like a sort of Kelly's Heroes post-war caper kind of thing. And then we realized, well, Howard Chaykin was doing American Century at the time at Vertigo, which had the 50s covered, 50s crime covered. And Garth Ennis was doing war stories at Vertigo, which had World War II covered. So it kind of felt like, and we would have had a foot in both of those camps. It just kind of felt, they're already doing things that are too similar. So Will just said, well, just reboot it. Just pitch us something else. So I kind of took that basic premise, which was the kind of slightly capery kind of vibe. Actually, Three Kings movie was another inspiration, like that kind of, along with Kelly's Heroes, that kind of combination of caper and war movie. And again, like the pitch evolved, but it ended up being sort of present day, and it was more set in a kind of like Iraq or Afghanistan war. But again, it was more of a caper trying to track down like gold or something like this. And I think it was Karen Berger who said, well, this is cool. Why don't you make it ongoing? Make it an ongoing series rather than just a mini series. And I was like, oh, okay. Which was weird because, like, it's funny enough, she'd said the same thing about Swamp Thing. I'd written the Swamp Thing mini series that was intended to be a standalone mini series just to reset the continuity. And then they said, oh, make it an ongoing. I was like, it's not meant to be an ongoing. It's ending where a new series would begin. The whole thing is like a process of resetting the character. It didn't quite work. But anyway, The Losers. So that making it ongoing presented an interesting challenge for me, because I was so used to thinking in terms of caper stories. Capers are very structured. A caper has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah. You put a team together to go and steal the thing, and then they plan the thing, and then they execute the heist, but then everything goes wrong, but then they improvise and just about make it by the skin of their teeth, or don't. But either way, at the end of the story, that's the end of the story. Yeah. So how to make that ongoing? So I had to figure out a way to make The Losers, but I knew I wanted to do like capers and heists, have that kind of tone to it. So it was how to make a ongoing series of heists, where it's all one big story made up of lots of little heists or capers or missions or whatever it is. And that's when I come up with the idea of them chasing this guy, Max, the bad guy. The name Max being a tip of the hat to the first Mission Impossible movie, which is another of my inspirations. So Max is the MacGuffin, the MacGuffin being the thing trying to steal in the caper. So that was the long-term goal, and that they had to do all of these other missions in order to try and achieve that ultimate goal. Even though it was meant to be ongoing. I always knew that I'm not going to be doing this for more than like 2 or 3 years. You know, I go crazy if I try and stay on the same thing too long, and I've got this inherent sense that stories should end. So I kind of I sort of pitched it as, you know, being about 2 to 3 year long story. But I always had this sense of how it was going to end. I knew it was about Max is trying to create like a sort of a new America that would rise from the ashes of the old America kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was kind of interested in the idea of how empires end, but I was also interested in the idea of, like, you know, exploding helicopters, because that's fun too, you know. So, you know, not to be all pretentious about it. I think the kind of, you know, the big ideas were very much kind of hidden behind the sort of gunfights and explosions, because that's the fun stuff. But yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's how it came about. Originally, Aisha was this version of it. I say originally, it's been through so many versions, but the version I wanted to do was much more about the history of the CIA in South America. It wasn't really. I didn't really want to make it about the Afghan war and the Middle East generally, because it felt too current. You know, it felt too. Everybody's got to have an opinion about what's happening right now. There's no historical perspective. I wanted it more, at least the background, to be more about CIA special operations in South America, you know, the Iran-Contra and all this kind of stuff. But I think it was Karen Berger who said, why don't you, because Aisha had a different name originally. I think she was called Fatima or something like that. But she was going to be a FARC rebel from Colombia, who ends up teaming up with these you know, special forces guys. Because I really want to because it's really messy and complicated down there, you know, the whole history of America and South America. But I think it was Karen Berger said, why don't you make her an Arab? Make her a Muslim, I think she said, because that would be really interesting. Character that she became already was kind of a very kind of frankly extremely violent character. And it would just, I think I don't, she never really she just said that, you know, and I was like, okay, you know, because I wanted to keep Karen Berger happy, because you would, wouldn't you, you know. So so I just kind of I followed that angle, and she sort of, the character evolved into what we saw. But I think Aisha worked, you know. I think she's one of the characters that people really seem to respond to, you know, and she was really fun to write. I don't think we'd ever do a sequel to The Losers, but if we did, it would be about trying to track down Aisha, I think. That would be fun, yeah. Because she kind of shows her true colors at the end of the story. You know? She finally comes out and says, "Death to America," you know. And the other thing was, like, you know, it only occurs to me now that the original directive I got was make her a Muslim. And she wasn't, you know. It's kind of like revealed later on in the story that she's an atheist, you know. You don't, I mean, there's plenty of cliches in The Losers. I'm not saying any of it's wildly original, but Aisha's a character you don't get to see very often, you know. So absolutely. She was fun to write.
Yeah, and so is it harder to write like a team book as opposed to, because if you're writing for, you know, like John Constantine, you can kind of write about him, but when it's a team book, like in each issue you have to have one moment with Pooch, one with Cougar, one with Clay, one with Jensen. Yeah. So was that kind of was that harder for you?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, because yes, I had a huge problem with that, because I didn't have the skill set for that. I didn't know how to write team books, because I didn't grow up reading them. You know, most superhero fans, they've grown up reading loads of team books, and they know how to split, you know, all these subplots apart, and, you know, how to bounce the characters off each other. But all the stuff I'd read tended to have these very kind of stoic loner anti-hero types, you know. So I knew how to write that, and certainly Constantine came very easily, because, you know, he was my favorite character in comics, you know. But just in terms of the simple mechanics of, you know, juggling multiple characters in parallel plot lines, I didn't know how to do that. I guess also because I'd grown up with 2000 AD, which is so sort of hyper condensed. There isn't time to split off into subplots. You know, you just follow the hero for 5 pages and that's it. So that was very much like kind of learning on the job for me. And I thought, you know what, I haven't actually read The Losers since I wrote it. Really? Like I said, I can't bear to look at my own work, because I think I'm terrible. I would be scared to look at it, because I'm sure I kind of really messed up that aspect of it. But I guess it would be educational for me to go back and look at it.
Yeah, and I think he did fine. Getting that comic turned into a film, it can't be that bad, of course. But like, it was still so. Like, who is your favorite member besides Jensen, of course, who's just the best, and everyone else kind of falls under him. But who's your favorite member of the Losers, or who's
Jensen.
your Jensen? Has to be. I'm so glad you said that. Has to be
No, but
Jensen.
all of them, I like all of them. I do like all of them, except Clay. I think Clay is a jerk.
Yeah,
I don't like that kind of macho, do as I say, kind of domineering character. They make for kind of like maybe kind of compelling anti-heroes, but doesn't mean you like them as like Frank Castle's a great character, but you wouldn't like him as a person. He's
yeah,
a
absolutely.
scum. And Clay, I just don't find a very likable guy. I don't like him. But I like obviously Jensen was fun. But I've got a lot of time for Pooch as well. Like, Pooch is a nice guy,
Yeah, Pooch
It's
comes
sort of
after Jensen for me. Yeah,
yeah, he's got like it's funny. I guess each of them's got a little bit of my own personality in them.
really.
Jensen's the bit of me that wants to sort of like say something sarcastic from the back of the classroom in school kind of thing. And Pooch is the family man side of me, the kind of slightly more warm and cuddly, laid
Yeah.
back side of me, and I guess Clay is the side of me that just kind of like, do it my way, which is not the side of myself I'm particularly proud of, but it is there.
Yeah.
And then Aisha's the side of me that just wants to blow everything up.
Of course, that's what you need to be a great writer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we all need that.
it comes with the territory, of course. But yeah, no. So that the Losers was actually turned into a film, and which I watched recently on Amazon Prime. But that was turned into a film. So I was like to get to see basically characters created by you on the big screen, played by like Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Zoe Saldana, Chris Evans. What was that like to see your characters on a big screen?
It was amazing. It was
Is it a bit
genuinely
surreal?
really freaky. Yeah, no, like me and Jock, we weren't super involved in the actual filmmaking process. We kind of we were in touch with the writer who would send us drafts for feedback and stuff like that in a sort of unofficial way, and sort of I met up with them in London. But in terms of actually the characters and the cast, we got flown over to the set in Puerto Rico and met them. Like we got like they were actually filming as we were let in, so we had to kind of hiding at the back, behind the camera kind of thing, trying to be very quiet. And then Zoe Saldana came over. Oh my God, are these the Diggle and Jock kind of thing? And she was like, but she's in costume. That she'd literally just done the shoot out in the hotel room scene. They were filming that when we walked in.
Oh, right.
And then she was absolutely lovely, like really friendly and welcoming. And then we were sort of talking to her, both feeling slightly starstruck, And then she kind of looked over and went, "Hey, Jensen, over here." Over, and he's like, again in full costume. He's got the glasses and the goatee and t-shirt and everything. But she didn't say, "Hey, Chris." She said, "Hey, Jensen." And so we turned, and then Jensen walked up, and the look on Jock's face was magic, because he was just going like, because he designed this guy, he designed the kind of the glasses and the goatee and this particular look he has, and then this hunk is walking over like, but it's the guy, and again he was super nice, and but it was really surreal. It was like they just stepped out of the pages of the comic we made. It was,
Yeah.
and we sort of, between takes, like we sort of like nipped outside for a cigarette with Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and he's wearing the black suit and it's just kind of like, we just kind of hung out having a smoke together. And it was like, it's really hard to describe
Yeah.
this. I feel like I'm talking, because they all looked just like they just stepped out of the page, It was great. It was really lovely, and they were all incredibly welcoming. And one interesting moment was when we sort of, like when they resumed filming, me and Jock, we just kind of sat at the back, the sort of these high folding chairs that you get, sort of quietly watching them. But Idris Elba was sitting next to us because he was waiting to be on, and I think he had a script in his lap. I think it might have been for like Luthor or something like that. He was preparing for a new part, and me and Jock were kind of watching them all filming, like really intently like this, and kind of whispering to each other. And then I kind of turned and realized that Idris Elba was watching us at the corners of his eyes, like not sort of suspiciously or giving us like the sort of side or something, but like he told us later that it was really interesting because I think he was in the process of kind of creating a new character for something he was about to do. I think it was Luthor, but I'm not sure. But he said he was fascinated by watching what they were doing with our characters. And that kind of like sort of weird feedback loop thing. That's how he described it. Like, because we saw him, we all saw the film for the first time together. We couldn't get to the premiere in LA because of there was this volcano that down flights. So me and Jock and Idris Elba saw it in London, and so we were chatting with him there, and he'd said that he found it really interesting seeing our reaction to all this. It's all kind of inside baseball, but yeah, like anyway, it was great, and they were all nice. And like, you know, especially Chris Evans in particular went out of his way to make us feel really welcome. You know, like, come over to my trailer and we'll have some beers together, kind of thing. You know, and it was just like, you know, really went out of his way to make us feel at ease. Like I'm super socially awkward, right? And I was really starstruck and just jet lagged, and it was the middle of the night at this point, and I was like, you know, I was kind of like, I felt a bit like a cat in a tumble dryer, because this, you know, we were like hanging out with them for hours, you know, and it felt like I felt really tense, which is kind of the opposite of what I should be feeling, but that's how it was. I got really anxious, actually. But yeah, like they were so, you know, just trying to make us feel relaxed and welcome. You know, it was nice.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's brilliant. So was it fun for you to see? And I know there were a few moments from the comics that were put onto the big screen. You're like, oh, I remember writing that, or I remember doing that. I think like, was the finger gun something that was in the comic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that was one of my favorite things I've ever written.
Yeah, with the like,
again, yeah, I just knew it worked, you know. And then like, normally I don't really, when I'm writing a script, I don't worry too much about like page layout and stuff like that. You know, let the artist deal with that. They're better at that than me. But just occasionally I will describe like a camera move or something like that, you know, but obviously translate into comics visual language. But the finger guns scene, when we do the reveal, when he kind of turns around and goes, you know, thanks Cougar, and then like I knew that I wanted to like the camera to go through the fingers, and then like, so I said to Jock, you know, like put it a series of slot shaped panels so we can do the zoom to like, get out of there. And then just they just translated it in the film like exactly as I'd originally written it. So that was great. That was really nice to see. And it was one of those ideas that I like, that the finger guns thing, that works. It's like, why has nobody done that before? I mean, maybe they have, I don't know. I hadn't seen it before. I sometimes worry that I've stolen something without realizing it, because I've got a terrible memory. Like, am I just stealing this from a movie and I can't remember, or did I just make that up? And half the time I genuinely can't tell. But that was one. I'm like, no, that works. And I heard that somebody else then stole it. Somebody stole it from the comic and put it in. It might have been the Expendables or something like that. I'm not sure. And put it in a movie before the Losers did it. So. But occasionally I'll see something in a movie that goes, wait a minute, didn't I write that? Like there's the bit in Sucker Punch where, like, you know, the hero is leaping with a katana at a giant samurai robot wielding a Gatling gun.
Oh, brilliant.
Now, literally the first page or the second page of my comic, Silent Dragon, amazingly drawn by Lanil Yu, has got the hero with a katana leaping at a giant samurai robot with a Gatling gun. And I'm like, Zack Snyder just literally lifted that image wholesale and put it in Sucker Punch, you know. So it's kind of imitation's a serious, you know.
I was just about to say that, yeah.
I'd rather get a check, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd probably go a long way, of course.
Yeah.
You brought it up there, Silent Dragon, I believe. What was it like to get to work on that?
That was great. I just got rung up by an editor at, was it Ben Abernathy? Yeah, at when he was an editor at Wildstorm. And he just said, basically, how would you like to write a 6-issue, create your own science fiction story for Lanil Yu to draw? And I was like, dude, I would pay you to let me do that. You know, it's kind of like, I mean, who wouldn't? So yeah, I mean, like Lanil's art is just, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. He just put his heart and soul into it. But my original idea was for something much more generic, frankly. I mean, it wasn't set in Japan. It wasn't like a sort of, it didn't have any Japanese influence at all. It was more of a sort of secret agent kind of thing. I wanted to do like a sort of $6 million man in the future kind of thing, or $6 billion man, I guess. But the idea of somebody who's, you know, basically had 99% of themselves replaced. You know, it's the old cyberpunk idea of, you know, like Ghost in the Shell or whatever. Like, you know, what is it that makes us human? Is it what's physical, or is it what we do, whatever? But I think it was Lanil said, well, you know, how about we set it in Japan? I think he just wanted to draw that kind of imagery, you know. He wanted to, and he's the one who suggested bringing in these sort of, you know, influences from like feudal Japan. You know, the idea of it's in the future, but there's this kind of nostalgia to it where they're trying to hark back to a sort of almost, you know, mythic past, which is something, and I found that really interesting because like I read a couple of a mythic past or whatever, and so I wanted to have a little bit of that flavor in there. It's not really particularly political comic, but just that sense of right-wing extremism tends to go hand in hand with sort of that nostalgia,
Yeah.
And samurai stuff just looks really cool, and Lemieux wanted to draw it, and I'm like, yeah, let's just do that. Okay, samurai robots it is, And then of course there's a part of my brain that always wants everything to make sense,
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so why would they use swords when they've got guns? Like, what possible reason would there be for that? And like play, sort of, if they're deliberately stepping back into their own past, then that's partly, it helps to justify it to a degree. There's a slight ritualization or fetishization of this kind of imagery. But mostly it was just kind of cool robots.
Yeah, badass,
Yeah.
Actually, but I just to bring back the losers, there's just one more question I want to ask. If you could see, I thought this the other day, if you could see the losers go against any other team in the history of comic books, who would it be? So many different ones. I was thinking maybe the Suicide Squad, but at the same time, like King Shark versus Jensen. Obviously, it goes to Jensen, but
he would just get bitten in half instantly.
you
But he
just
would
get
probably say something funny on the way down. Oh God, I don't know how to think in these terms. The losers versus, you know what? They're not. Can I cheat and say it's not a comic team? I want to see the losers go up against the A-Team, because that movie came out the same year and stole our thunder. So I think the losers would play much dirtier and would take down the A-Team. That's the fight I want to
absolutely.
see. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I couldn't have asked for a better answer there. But yeah, no, so coming off that, you also got to work on Hellblazer a little bit. So what was that like? Of course, the John Constantine puff there. Just have to.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
don't vape, kids. It's very bad for you.
Yeah.
No, Constantine is my favorite character in comics. I wanted to write him since I first read him and Swamp Thing when I was 15. And like I said, me and Jock, we were going to pitch for Hellblazer as our first approach. Well, not pitch for it, but use it as a calling card. Like that we can do this. I loved it. So it was literally a dream job to get. And I felt like unlike most other pre-existing characters, I felt like I knew what I was doing with him.
Yeah.
I felt like I had a feel for it in a way that I didn't necessarily with other characters. It was a bit of a bumpy road behind the scenes, to admit. On the editorial side, it's kind of there were some problems, but which I probably would have stuck on it longer. This idea for this, basically the story you saw, the big arc. I always like to have an ending in mind, and I knew where the ending was going to be. I knew what the arc was going to be, but I had originally intended to sprinkle a few more standalone, like Monster of the Week type issues in.
Yeah.
I really like done in one issues. I really love that, and I think Hellblazer lends itself to that stuff really well. That issue 27 of Hellblazer, Hold Me, by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean, is like my favorite issue of a comic, or one of my favorite issues of a comic ever. It's just perfect, done in one little ghost story. And so it would be a way to work with lots of different artists as well. Like if big name artist can't commit to a whole arc or whatever, but they might be able to just do 22 pages. It would have been a really nice way to sort of to sprinkle them in there. And I've still got lots of sort of stories like that I would like to do, but it didn't work out for various reasons. I probably would have stuck around longer, but like it got a bit bumpy towards the end there. In fact, funnily enough, actually, to be honest, it got bumpy. It was bumpy from the first issue, because I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but yeah, there were some logistical problems behind the scenes, which kind of put a bit of a kink in things, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in comics, John Constantine has always been friends with Swamp Thing. Now, it's some brilliant segue skills there. You didn't even see it coming. Like I was on about professionalism, you also got to work on Swamp Thing. What was that like?
Very smooth, very smooth.
Oh, you're too kind, too kind.
Swamp Thing's great, but big shoes to fill. And I'm not sure how well I did that. Because Alan Moore's Swamp Thing was just like incredible. I loved that. That was really one of the comics that put me on the path. It showed me what comics could be and what comics could do. And it was a valuable lesson in how just because your comic is about, you know, a big dumb plant monster, doesn't mean your comic has to be about a big dumb plant monster. You know, it can be about all kinds of things that are relevant to the real world, even if they're full of werewolves and vampires and whatever. And that was an education for me as a teenager. In terms of picking up the continuity, that was tough because by the end of the Mark Millar run, Swamp Thing had literally become the planet Earth. By the end of his run in continuity, Swamp Thing wasn't just like the plant elemental. He was also like the earth elemental and the fire elemental and the water elemental. And he was literally became planet Earth. It's kind of like, and they're like, hey, do you want to write Swamp Thing? I'm like, dude, he's a planet. How do I write a planet? So yeah, I mean, I'm sure lots of writers would be capable of doing amazing comics about a planet, but I'm not that guy, you know. So for me, and because it was commissioned as a mini series, not an ongoing, I thought, okay, well, here's what I'll do. I'll do this. I pitched this story that was designed to get him back to being the plant monster again. So that's what that arc's about. So that after that, it's kind of like hit the reset button. It's about stripping him of his powers because he was abusing them, basically. Then it kind of leaves the character with a clean slate. So if they then at some future date wanted to do a new ongoing series, then they can just do an ongoing series about Swamp Thing, who is a plant monster, you know, used to be Alec Holland. And they don't have to, so it's to make it new reader friendly, basically. I was trying to untangle the continuity. And it was like when I was on like issue 4 or something, when they, you know, Karen Berger said, hey, why do you make this an ongoing? And I'm like, because I don't know what happens next, because the whole thing is designed to get him back to a clean slate. If I was going to do an ongoing Swamp Thing story, I would have started where my miniseries ended, you know, with a new clean slate. But instead, it was all tangled up by that point. So it was kind of messy. And I think Josh Dysart and tried to, came in to see if he could carry it on, but like nothing. It hadn't been planned because it was a spontaneous decision to keep it going. And I think you kind of need to lay the groundwork in advance for that kind of thing. It was, yeah. So, like I say, I mean, like if I don't have a feel for it, then I don't want to do it, you know. I didn't have a feel for it. I mean, in terms of continuing it, I mean, so, and I think I made the right decision there. I mean, but it was a great honor. But at the same time, you know, it was the same like when I took on Daredevil. You know, if you're following these huge talents, they're very big shoes to fill, and I find it quite intimidating, to be honest. You know, like with Swamp Thing, following on from like, you know, Alan Moore and Grant Morrison and Mark Millar, and then with Daredevil, it was like Bendis and Ed Brubaker, and I'm like, I can't compare myself with those guys. You know, I do my best, but yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I'm the guy.
No, you absolutely are. And you gave me a little segue there, Daredevil. That whole time I was going to say Swamp Thing I would describe as a Daredevil and lead into that, but you stole my thunder by bringing up Daredevil. I've been planning this since the moment I was born. This was going to be my master stroke, but you foiled it. I'm going to mess around. Yeah, so you got to work on Daredevil, Shadowland, which is one of my favorite stories. What was that like?
Well, I'm glad to hear you liked Shadowland, because it got absolutely panned when it came out. I got a lot of stick over Shadowland. Basically they, I think it was, you know, talking to Ed Brubaker about it when they invited me on, and he was saying, well, here's what's going to happen. The Hand, evil ninja assassins, our Daredevil's arch enemies, are going to make him their new leader. And I'm like, why? why would they do that? And he was like, oh, you'll figure it out. Okay. So I asked the editors, like, okay, so they're evil assassins. He's their arch enemy. He refuses to kill anybody. Why would they make him their leader? And they were like, you'll figure it out. Okay. And they said, oh, and also, by the way, the Hand are going to build a giant castle in the middle of Manhattan and take over Hell's Kitchen. And I'm like, why? And they're like, you'll figure it out. Okay. What are, you know, Doctor Strange and the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man all live in Manhattan. What are they doing right now? And they're like, oh, they're not in this story. Okay. Why? You'll figure it out. Yeah. So I didn't really know what the hell I was doing, honestly. They asked me to do this crossover with all of the street level heroes. They kind of gave me literally a list of characters to put in there. And I tried to do my best. Actually, it comes back to what you were saying before about like juggling multiple characters and team books and stuff like that. You know, I don't know if I did a good job on that. So yeah, but the thing that I got most criticism from the fans was that I sort of turned Daredevil bad and then revealed that he was being controlled by the Beast, this demonic character, and they said that was a cop out. They hated that because they wanted him to actually be bad. Okay, fair enough. Maybe I should have been braver, because I was worried I would break the character if I actually turned him evil, made him irredeemable. But hey, it's comics, whatever. But like the thing that I thought that people knew, but most readers didn't seem to get, was that the Beast is a character from Frank Miller's Daredevil and Elektra comics, from things like Elektra Assassin and Elektra Lives Again. Because the Hand were like major players in those stories, and that in those books it's established that the Hand worship the Beast who is trying to bring about the apocalypse. So they're bad.
Yeah.
And they're doing bad things, and I wanted to, like, way I could make sense of Matt Murdock choosing to lead them, like assassins who won't assassinate because he wouldn't let them. He's like, I didn't know how to untangle that knot, honestly. But funnily enough, actually, we're talking about sort of seeing bits from the comics end up in movies. The whole, like, when the Hand end up imprisoning all of the cops in the sewers beneath Manhattan. And then I saw The Dark Knight Rises, where all the cops get imprisoned in the sewers beneath Gotham. And I'm like, that looks familiar. Didn't I write that? But there are characters I don't think I did them justice, because I didn't really know enough continuity. I didn't really have a feel for like characters like Moon Knight. I could have done something really interesting with Moon Knight. I think I was a little out of my depth, if I'm honest. I'm probably being much too honest, aren't I?
No, not at all. Like Shadowland, like even what you say, it's one of my favorite Daredevil stories because Daredevil's controlled by a demon. There's these ninja organization, and you got to include so many other superheroes. It's definitely one of my favorites. Like nonetheless, I absolutely loved it, and I believe you got to work with Bullseye a little bit in that, or was that in some other stories?
Yeah, I got to kill Bullseye.
Bullseye's my favorite Marvel film of all time, and I love that story he was in.
I did a bit of a bait and switch on it because in the pitch, in my outline for the story, Daredevil kills Bullseye. That's the fight they have is actually on top of the Javits Convention Center, where they have the New York Comic Con. So I remember like wandering around in the foyer, looking up at I can't remember who I was with. It might have been Jock. We're looking up at this kind of glass ceiling made of glass squares. I remember thinking that'd be a great location for a fight. If like every time a blow misses, they punch out one of the panes, and so the kind of battlefield they're fighting on becomes increasingly more hazardous, and they've got to hop from one like across the missing panes.
Brilliant.
We didn't really have the page count to actually bring that to life the way I wanted to, but that's where it came from. But in my original outline for the story, Daredevil kills Bullseye in that fight, and then Bullseye gets resurrected by the Hand to kind of become like evil, sort of super zombie Bullseye. But when I actually came to write it, I didn't do that. I just left him dead. Yeah. Because you never get to kill people in comics and have them stay dead. I thought, I'm going to see if I can get away with this. Let's see if anybody complains. And the editors didn't complain. They just let him be dead. And then of course somebody brought him back eventually because hey, it's comics. Nobody stays dead in comics.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, like it lasted a while. When I got invited to write Thunderbolts, it was after the Warren Ellis run. And he had a lot of fun with like writing Bullseye and Venom. And when they offered it to me after that, I was like, yeah, because I could have a lot of fun writing Bullseye and Venom. I like writing bad guys. And then like 2 issues in, they took Bullseye and Venom away from me because they wanted to put them in another team. They were becoming like Evil Avengers or something at that point. And I was like, oh, God damn, okay, fair enough. So I kind of had to kind of go through all the sort of C-list villains to see how I could put them there. I mean, that's the point in Thunderbolts. They're meant to be kind of, C-list villains who are expendable, like Suicide Squad. But I really wanted to have fun with those characters, and I didn't get to play with them as much as I would have liked. I think they're only in the first 2 issues. But I had fun with Thunderbolts because it's just, it's fun to write bad guys. I really enjoyed writing Norman Osborn.
Yeah,
as a suit-wearing, respectable kind of like head of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of thing, or Hammer, I like writing, smart psychopaths. That's always really fun.
Yeah,
like ruthless villains. That was a good time.
And I don't know if it was you, but I believe there's a story where Bullseye pretended he was Hawkeye, and I was like, yeah, that's work for it. Was that you? It wouldn't have been, was it? Sorry, you just cut out a little bit there. If you can still hear me, you're glitching. I think your screen's.
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back now. Yeah, you're back. Sorry, you were just.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, all good.
No
all
worries.
good. It's just.
Yeah, Dark Reign. That was Dark Reign Hawkeye. That's where like Bullseye was. It was like Norman Osborn was taking villains and making them into new Avengers as part of this kind of Dark Reign Hammer initiative kind of thing. And they just said, "Hey, do you want to do Evil Hawkeye?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do Evil Hawkeye." So yeah, it was. It's just fun. I guess, especially in superhero comics at the time, you didn't often get to have that much fun with just going all out evil. There was usually, because the heroes would be around to, put them in their place, and there were no heroes. I just got to be evil, so that was a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so another comic book character you got to work on, he's only a small character called Batman. He hasn't gotten to do much. He's a really up and comer. But yeah, you got to do a story where Batman fought Lex Luthor and robots, and it's brilliant. So I also like to get to work on Batman.
That was great. Yeah, no, they should do more comics with that guy. I think he's got potential. It occurred to me that Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor are very, very similar characters. You always think of villains as, heroes as having particular rogues gallery, but they all live in a shared universe. So, why not swap around a little bit? And obviously, they do, but I couldn't remember having seen much in the way of Bruce Wayne versus Lex Luthor. And it occurred to me, well, they're both genius, billionaire, running tech companies, very driven people. Both of them kind of break or abuse the law for their own agendas, and they kind of mirror images of each other in a lot of ways, in ways that Lex Luthor and Superman aren't, So I thought, well, let's just pit them against each other in that. And I'm also interested in something I did it in Silent Dragon too. Something I do a fair bit, it seems, is this idea of, I'm interested in the idea of autonomous weapons systems, robot weapons. My brother works for a defense contractor, and I'm kind of like fascinated but worried by the implications of this kind of stuff, Plus, robots are just cool.
Yeah, of course.
So I kind of always like this idea of what happens when the wrong guy gets control of them, I mean, we've got them now. We've got like robot tanks in Eastern Europe and robot drones over the Middle East and whatnot, and it's. Seeing the NYPD have now got one of these Boston Dynamics robot dogs. It's literally only a matter of time before they start strapping guns to these things, and I'm kind of, it's cool and it's fascinating, but it's also really deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
I like to, it's kind of who controls the technology and what it's used for, who gets to decide what it points at, is something that interests me.
Yeah. And so although Batman is only a small character, you got to work on a huge character, Adam Strange. I'm super proud of that joke. You got to work on Adam Strange, who's like, he's kind of like, he's more of a C-lister, but recently becoming kind of bigger. So what was it like? Did you feel like there was a bit of freedom accosted there? Because he's not necessarily this huge famous character. So if you have him deliver dialogue different, no one would say, that's not how Adam Strange would say it.
Yeah, exactly that. I actually much prefer writing C-list characters, honestly.
Really?
I think when I'm doing the A-list guys, there is such a weight of expectation and such a passionate fan base with very strong ideas about how they believe it should be done. They don't all agree with each other, but they have their own, you're doing it wrong kind of point of view. Whereas with less famous characters, you've got a lot more wiggle room. You can be a bit more creative because people aren't quite as set in their opinions. And like I said before, I like revamping stuff. And that was a very open brief. I think it was Dan DiDio who asked me to do that. And he told me right at the beginning, it's going to be the lead-in to the Rand Thanagar War, which is going to be a big crossover event. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. How does the war start? And he's like, I don't know. We'll let you know. Okay. So if you want me to lead into it, how exactly do you want me to lead into it? Like, I need to know what's going to happen. It's like, we'll let you know. Okay. So I wanted to do something I wanted to be fun. And I think that's a book where you can tell I was having fun writing it. You can always tell. I really enjoyed it. I'd only read a few Adam Strange stories before that, like his appearance in Swamp Thing and some of the really old stuff from the 60s. But I knew I wanted to get that combination of that kind of like sort of gritty, earthy Gotham City kind of vibe, and then to use that as like making it feel very grounded and like possibly this guy's just a nut, you know.
Yeah.
And then contrast it with this very bright, optimistic, pulpy Flash Gordon kind of vibe when he finally does get to space, you know. So that's why I started it. If I just started with, here's my fin, and here's my jetpack, and here's my ray gun, then it might come across as a bit cheesy to people who weren't familiar with the character. The other important thing is I wanted it to be an introduction to the character for people who've never read him before. I mean, he's in a few things now, but back then he just hadn't been around for years, you know. So I'd like, hence starting with that police interrogation in Gotham City. I wanted that, you know, it doesn't just get the story rolling, but it also acts as exposition for new readers and sort of dramatizes the situation and explains who he is with this very contrasting version, because he just seems like a crazy drunk at that point, you know. But no, it was really good fun. But it was meant to be like 8 issues, but it was. And it wasn't until I think I'd written like issue 6, and I kept asking DC, so you keep telling me that you want me to lead into the Rann-Thanagar War, but you haven't told me how. You haven't told me any of your plans. Do you have any plans? And I could never get a straight answer.
Yeah.
And so basically I just kept going. What I wanted to is so part of the premise of Adam Strange is that he sort of gets teleported to this another planet where he has, you know, a wife and child. And like the stories about that planet disappears and he's trying to hunt the planet down. Basically, somebody's stolen the entire star system. And my idea, like, by the time I got to issue 6, I was kind of like, okay, I'm just going to have to make up my own ending at this point because they're not going to tell me what's going to happen in this crossover. So I thought a really great way to end it would be he finally finds the planet. There's going to be the big battle with the bad guys. And then but the planet's going to be destroyed. And so the only way he can save his family and the rest of the planet is to teleport it away again, but in such a way that the villains can never find it. So he won't, and even Adam doesn't know where he's sending it to. It's kind of like scrambled coordinates or something like that. So, and then like after he's defeated the bad guys, his family's still missing, but he knows they're out there somewhere. And I thought that would be a great basis for a new ongoing series at a later date. Like, you know, he could just basically be traveling the universe on his own, trying to find his family, find their planet. And you could tell a million different stories. It's kind of like, you know, adventure of the week, whatever, building up towards this big arc. I thought that would be an interesting new premise for Adam Strange.
Absolutely.
But in the end, I think I'd basically written issue 7 before DC finally got in touch and said, okay, here's how your story is going to end. And they told me what was going to happen at the end. I was like, okay, I'll do that then. So it didn't quite, because I didn't know what I was leading up to, because, you know, we had to produce the comic. I needed to keep turning script pages out for the artist to draw. And Pascal Ferry was amazing artist. I love his work on that book. So like, you know, it's funny, I've had a few people say to me, I really like Adam Strange, but what happened at the end? It's because the story is kind of going this way and then it suddenly goes that way and stops, because that's kind of, you know, how it works sometimes in comics companies, unfortunately. You know, had I known in advance what they were going to want, then I could have, I think, flowed a bit more organically towards that end point. But, you know, it worked okay. I think the ending wasn't terrible, but it just, I wasn't entirely satisfied with the way it worked out there. But no, I think you could tell I was having fun with it.
Definitely. And you've gotten to do like a few create your own series. Just to name one, you also got to work on Snapshot. So how was it like to get to work on Snapshot with Jack?
Yeah, I kind of like that was a story idea that I would kind of enthusiastically pitch people down the pub at conventions, you know, when we were all having a pint together. And somehow I talked Jock into doing it. Originally we were going to just do it as a 4-issue, you know, pitch it directly to Image Comics. But it was, funnily enough, at another bar at New York Comic Con, I bumped into Matt Smith, editor of 2000 AD.
Oh, wow.
So this was not that long after I'd left, a couple of years after, I can't remember the dates. But I'd noticed that he'd started publishing some create your own stuff in the magazine. I think it was like Tank Girl and stuff like this. Because like Rebellion had always forbade me from commissioning create your own stuff. There's like, we've got to own everything. But like, the magazine has like really small budget, so sometimes you got to put reprint or something in there. So it's like, well, what do we reprint? So like, you know, but seeing that they were putting Tank Girl in there just as a way of saving a bit of budget, I was like, well, if you're looking for a create-your-own story, black and white, you say, So yeah, so we ended up doing it for the magazine first, so
Oh,
like,
wow.
meeting the monthly deadlines for that rather than doing it in our own time. So that was good because that gave us a little bit of, like not a huge fee, but we got paid a bit for it, for the content, but not for the rights. So that was great. So we just got us, because I need a deadline. I need somebody to crack the whip, otherwise I'll just kind of flounder around.
Yeah.
So having Matt to kind of like, where's my script, was good. I need that. And then we pitched it to Image, and they went, yeah, do that. So
Wow.
that was a very smooth process. It didn't really sell very well. I mean, like Jock is a huge draw now, deservedly so. But that book always just languished in obscurity. Like nobody read it. It's, I don't know why. It just didn't quite hit the spot with people. And a lot of people say it's because it was in black and white, but The Walking Dead was in black and white, and that was like an industry, So yeah, it just didn't.
Yeah, all things considered, Snapshot is not a bad comic,
Thank you. I mean, to be fair, I probably didn't do enough myself to promote it, and that's the thing. When you're doing independent books, you have to really bang the drum to put eyes on it, and I didn't. I've always been too. Too something bashful, whatever.
Yeah.
I feel self-conscious about promoting myself like that, but it's a necessary part of the job, so that's on me, I think.
Yeah, and so you also got to work on another creator-owned series called Control. I suppose that there's about 50 million comics you've done, so just have to get.
Control, that was Nick Barucci at Dynamite had said that they were putting together a crime line. Like a sort of like a branded line of crime comics, and he knew that I like crime comics, and it's my kind of thing. He had Garth Ennis on board. He said at the time, like,
Wow.
yeah, that's good company to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think that was the origin of it. Originally Ben Oliver was going to draw it. He actually did the first couple of pages, and they're beautiful. I love Ben; is amazing. He's so good. But that didn't work out for whatever reason. I think he had other commitments or whatever. So Andrea Mucci ended up doing it, did a fine job. It was just one of those, most of the stuff I've ever written, 9 times out of 10, it's just because an editor drops me an email or rings me up and says, hey, how would you like to write so-and-so? And I go, yeah, okay. But the weird thing, so that's how that came about. But the weird thing is I've actually turned down a lot of really A-list stuff.
Really?
Yeah, like I'm not kidding when I say I like writing the C-list characters. Like I turned down Detective Comics. Everybody thought I was insane. This was a long time ago now, but this was kind of mid 2000s or something like that. I can't remember what it was. It was not long. 2000 something. I can't remember when it was. Over 10 years ago, anyway. But Bob Schreck offered it to me after we'd like I went to dinner at San Diego with Jock and like the sort of the Batman group team from DC, and walking back to the hotel, Bob Schreck offered me Detective Comics, and I was hugely flattered because that's a big deal. That is a really big deal. But I was just like I say, I'm too honest, but I was just completely honest with him as well. I was like, I'm super flattered, but I'm not the guy for that job. Because that kind of it's a big commitment of. It's not just a big commitment. It's that it's that kind of long form storytelling. That I'm not good at. I'm not good at like the kind of the heavily continuity based stuff, and I didn't feel confident enough in my own ability to do it right. To do justice. I know how to write Batman himself, but in terms of all of the supporting characters and their histories and their relationships and connections and all that kind of stuff. You need to do, when you've got like a fan base of that magnitude, you really need to know what you're doing. And I just didn't feel like I would be capable of doing it justice, honestly. I've still got more Batman stories I want to tell, but they're stories. You know what I mean? There's a Joker story that I really, really want to do. I remember pitching it to Jock at a restaurant in Angoulême a few years back, and he was like, dude, that sounds awesome. I really want to do it.
With Condiment King, of course.
What's that?
Condiment King. You must know Condiment. You don't know Condiment King? Okay, basically, he's this Batman villain, and all he does is shoot people with ketchup and mustard. That's his whole gimmick. He deals with radish. It's brilliant. I bring him up all the time. He's just the best DC character. And I've been offered money by some previous comic writers just to not bring it up anymore. But, you can't buy off Condiment King. He's just so good. You have to Google him. This Condiment King, that's all he does. He just deals with relish.
How would he deal with Dog Welder?
Exactly. You see, it could go either way. Because, he could get tied dogs onto him, or he could pull it off with ketchup, Could go either way. See, this is why I should be working for DC with my Condiment King ongoing series. It's not.
You're the ideas guy.
Yeah, the editors. I think they're having some problems with their email because they haven't been getting back to me, and I think maybe it's busted or something. But it's only a matter of time,
Just keep pestering them. They love that. Or just ring them up in the middle of the night.
That's already what I do. You see, I'm ahead of the curve. It's all going to come together. It's only a matter of time, of course. But yeah, no. So another independent comic got to work on was Ratcatcher. So what was that like?
Ratcatcher, that was a good one. That was something that I originally thought of as a movie screenplay I was going to write.
Oh, really?
Like a FBI crime thriller. I remember the idea for that came to me when I was sitting on a plane leaving San Diego Comic-Con. It was like one of those little connecting flights that was going to LA, a little prop plane. And I remember just kind of sitting in the seat looking out over the tarmac before the plane took off. It was a really bright summer's day. I was thinking of movies like Heat, the chase scene at the end at the airport. And just, like it's a place where people aren't supposed to be. You're not going to see people running around on airfield, when this plane's taking off. Like, okay, but if there was somebody running around here, what would they be doing? And it just kind of sort of spiraled from there. Just this idea of somebody who goes somewhere, they're being pursued, they're going, who are they? Are they pursuing someone, or are they being pursued? And it was weird. It's one of those kind of, I really like traveling on my own, because my brain goes into this kind of freewheeling, brainstorming, free association kind of thing. For some reason, I get quite inspired story-wise when I'm just staring at planes and trains and things. And I think by the time I arrived back in London, I pretty much had the whole thing, the whole story for Ratcatcher kind of planned out.
Those are my favorites. Those are my favorite type of comics, like the cat and mouse, like the genre. Those are my favorite type of comics or films.
Yeah. Like I was really inspired by Heat, the fact that Heat gives equal screen time to the hero and the villain. And that they're kind of mirror images of each other. And so that was always baked into Ratcatcher, was this idea that it's kind of, you give equal screen time to both characters, but then I don't want to spoil it for your readers, but there's a big twist in the middle of Ratcatcher, which kind of turns everything on its head.
He's been Condiment King the whole time.
So, what's that?
He's been Condiment King the whole time.
But the other guy's Dog Welder.
Oh my God, and then we've been Bruce Willis the whole time as the reader. It's all been a dream. Some of the best tropes you can get.
Yeah.
It has to be.
I was that was gonna be a film script. I was just gonna write it on spec and hope for the best, try and find an agent. And it wasn't long after that, I'd kind of written up like a detailed outline, but I hadn't actually started scripting it. And it was around that time that somebody at DC, probably Will Dennis again, bless him, Will's thrown me so much work, he's great. But he said, hey, we're putting together a Vertigo crime line. We're doing, a series of standalone crime graphic novels.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, I've literally just planned one out, at least the crime story. So that was, it's kind of like, here's what I prepared earlier. It was really good timing. And then when Victor Ibanez came on to draw it, because I wasn't familiar with his work. I think he'd sent in specs, or I think maybe Will sent him a few pages to do samples or something like that. I may be wrong about that, but I think that's how he got the job. He met him at a show. I think he may have met him at maybe at Barcelona or something like that. But the art is phenomenal. He did such a great job of just bringing the characters to life and really giving that kind of dusty kind of Texas Badlands kind of vibe to it. The acting, the characters is all great. I love Victor's work. And again, unfortunately, they had really big names doing those Vertigo crime books, Azzarello and Ian Rankin and people like this. But I think because it was like there's small digest-sized hardbacks, which is like an odd format for comics, like an unfamiliar format. I think they were trying to get them to appeal to people who read crime novels.
Yeah.
but it ended up sort of not really appealing to them or to regular comics fans, because people want their regular comic sizes. So it sort of fell between two stools, which is a shame, you know. I mean, I didn't take it personally because, you know, I think everybody found the same thing with that format. But that was a book I'm really proud of, actually. Not
Yeah.
many people seem to have seen that one. It's not on people's radar. But we got the good thing is we got the rights back a few years
Oh,
later.
no way.
Warner Brothers initially optioned it for a bit, but then when that lapsed, the baked into the contract was that if they allow that to lapse, then after a certain period of time, me and Victor get the film rights back, which we now have.
Wow.
So yeah, at some point, I need to actually get my act together and finally turn it into that screenplay that it was originally meant to be. You know, I'm sort of halfway through adapting it, actually. My agent spent like a year screaming at me saying, you know, where's my script? Because I kept promising it to him and then not delivering. But it's been a slightly turbulent couple of years for me, and other things keep cropping up, getting in the way. But I've got a couple of projects on the go at the moment, but when I finish them, then finally finishing the Ratcatcher script is.
It's good.
I've been saying this for years. My friends who might be watching this will probably be laughing at this point because I'm always talking about finishing things and then never finishing them. So yeah, we'll see. Don't hold me to that.
Of course. You know, and Conman King has to make an appearance. You know, you could call him Relish Ravager. That's not something I came up with on the spot. That's my own creator-owned series, Relish Ravager. I came up with that a while ago, just because I'm obviously going to steal Conman King, but in a way where they can't sue me. You know, think smart, not hard. But you also got to work on Uncanny. So what's that like? I only have a few more comics to go through, but you know, we're nearing the end. You don't have to worry. We got to work on Uncanny. What's that like?
Uncanny. I never liked the title.
Yeah,
they basically said that's one where Nick Barucci, that he got in touch and said
X-Men-ish.
he kind of pitched it to me. He pitched me the concept. He said that it's about this guy who can steal other people's sort of gifts, talents, whatever, for a short period of time, and then use them to execute missions or heists or whatever. And I like the concept. And I kind of like the fact that it's kind of like it's kind of modern and urban, but it's slightly supernatural, but in a kind of understated kind of way. So yeah, that was a cool concept, but I never liked the title Uncanny. I remember I sent them like a list of half a dozen alternative titles, but they were like, no, it's going to be called Uncanny. Like, but everybody's going to think it's the Uncanny X-Men, or they'll think we're stealing it from the Uncanny X-Men. But you know, for whatever reason, that's what they wanted. But yeah, that was cool. I read some blog posts. I can't remember who wrote it now. I'm blanking on the name. But he was talking about my work in general, and he pointed out, he used Uncanny as an example of me writing like tough guys who aren't as tough as they pretend to be, or something like that, you know. Yeah. And I think that's Uncanny is one where I was deliberately and consciously doing that, you know. Somebody who, like, on the outside seems like this cool sort of James Bond type, but actually then you get under his skin a little bit, and you see you're getting flashbacks to him being this sort of scared little boy and this kind of thing. And it's just, I wanted to, you know, because everybody likes tough guy stories, but you also want to write human beings, you know, who actually have feelings other than just rage. So yeah, that's one I again, like, I haven't read it since I wrote it, so I don't know how well I pulled it off, but the people who've read it seem to really like that one.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, that was good. And also that was the getting to work with Aaron Campbell. It was a real pleasure. He's a great guy, and like really perfect. Did a perfect job on that art. Yeah, that's the best thing about this. And I've been really, really lucky in that regard. It's nice to feel like part of it, like when it's like feels like a proper collaboration, you know.
Yeah.
And you click, you're in sync together. That's a good feeling. So yeah, when it works, it works.
Absolutely. And so the last two comics I want to touch on, one you got to work on for a little bit was Doctor Who. I believe you did a story for the 11th Doctor, was it Matt Smith? Yes.
Yeah.
Were you a Doctor Who fan growing up, or how did you get into the whole Doctor Who universe?
Well, I'm not as huge a Doctor Who fan as some of my close friends. I've got some real major Who-y friends. Fortunately, they were on hand down the pub to answer my stupid questions about Who continuity and stuff like that. One of them being Eddie Robson, who I eventually invited to come and help me co-write Doctor Who. He co-wrote Skyjacks with me. He's a good friend of mine, and he really knows his Doctor Who inside out. He's a good writer, Eddie. But yeah, it's a British institution, you know. I mean, everybody knows Doctor Who, you know. I found it really fun trying to write for Matt Smith's Doctor, because he's a very engaging actor, and he's got like he'll bring every line to life, and it's in a way that's hard to imitate in comics. You know, that very kinetic kind of performance he does is difficult to translate into a static medium like comics. So that was an interesting challenge. Like, okay, well, how am I going to try and imply that through the dialogue? You know, that slightly elevated, slightly hyperactive, slightly manic style. So yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that, especially working with Mark Buckingham on the first one. That was really nice, and also the fact he's doing really short stories as well. I like short stories, like 1 or 2 issues. Again, it's probably that 2000 AD in my blood, you know, like keeping everything, you know, short and sweet, and partly because, you know, I've got ADHD, which means I've got the attention span of a toddler, so I just want to, you know, cut to the chase, skip to the end, keep it moving, you know, pace. That's why my comics move fast, because I get bored easily, you know. So yeah, nice. And Doctor Who's a great, because the premise of Doctor Who is constantly jumping into new adventures all the time. It's the perfect premise for doing that exact, you know, like lots of fast moving stories and new locations with new characters, and yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, so speaking of British institutions, you also got to work on James Bond. I am on a roll with this, guys. I cannot be stopped. You know, just saying. But yeah, you got to work on James Bond. That was the original Ian Fleming's James Bond. So like none of the film ones. So like, did you take any of the films as inspiration, or did you treat it as a different character? Because like,
well, it's a mix. That one of the things that made that interesting for me, and I really, you know, I like Bond, you know, problematic as it is, and that was a real fun book to write. 2 books, in fact. But the premise for the publishing is that it is the James Bond from Ian Fleming's original novels, which was started in the 50s, but set in the present day. Now that automatically creates an interesting mix, because, you know, the what Bond has evolved into in the movies is really quite different from what was in the original novels. The novels are much more grounded. You know, they don't really have a lot of orbital laser sharks or whatever. And so trying to bring, and it was, you know, very grounded in the Cold War. And then so trying to take that kind of grounded approach to Bond, but putting him in the present day where there is no Cold War, I found, okay, that's really interesting. That's exactly the kind of thing I like to write, you know. And it also gave me an opportunity to, because like, you know, each generation of Bond is kind of reflective of the time it was made. And so it kind of gave me a chance, okay, well, how do I reflect the present day, you know, geopolitically, whatever. Yes, you know, it's still exploding helicopters and stuff, but I still wanted to make it feel vaguely relevant, especially with Kill Chain, the second one. Early 2016, because I wanted to reinvent Smersh with like the KGB bad guys in the original novels, and in the early movies they replaced them with Spectre, which is a criminal organization. Nobody had used Smersh for years. But it occurred to me that, well, you know, Russia might be an interesting foil these days. So I started researching what Russia was up to in early 2016. This is before Trump got elected, okay? This was like early 2016. And I discovered all this interesting stuff about what Russia was up to in terms of like active measures and cyber warfare and dirty tricks and assassinations in Eastern Europe, especially Ukraine. And so you know, the cyber attacks and hoaxes and troll farms. So I learned about the Internet Research Agency, which is basically like a Russian troll farm. And I also read about General Mike Flynn, who was at the time the National Security Director, and who was, you know, like under some deep suspicions for being a foreign agent for Turkey and possibly Russia. And I remember thinking, what if the Director of National Intelligence was actually working for Russia? That would be an interesting premise for a Bond story, wouldn't it? What's Russia trying to do? They're trying to destabilize Europe, and they're trying to break up the European Union and Great Britain. And so I started to sort of put all that into my pitch, or into my outline, in fact, for Dynamite Comics for James Bond Kill Chain. And all of that stuff, and that was in early 2016. And then when I started writing the script, that's when, you know, the election happened in America with sort of Trump versus Hillary and stuff, when Russia brought out all of these tricks they'd been using in Eastern Europe and started applying them to America, just like happened in my story. And it's kind of like that, and that was really weird. And then, you know, Mike Flynn, you know, perjured himself and ended up, you know, in handcuffs, and that's the character I based my Director of National Intelligence on in the comic. And it was like, wow, okay, the people I've been following for information on this stuff clearly know what they're talking about. I can't claim any credit for my, being insightful myself. I was
Yeah.
just following the right people on Twitter and reading the articles they were linking to and this kind of stuff. It's like, okay. So I think I was slightly ahead of the curve on the whole what Russia's up to kind of stuff back then. And now, of course, everybody's so sick and tired of hearing about it. It's not news, but at least people have woken up. But that was interesting times. But yeah, so like, sorry, this is a slightly rambly answer, but yeah, trying to make Bond fun and feel like Bond, but without just repeating all of the tired cliches, and like, the shaken not stirred and all that kind of stuff. That stuff feels really old and tired now, I think, so you want to, and you want, like you were asking about the movie. So like, it's not like, because it's based on the Bond of the books, it doesn't have, it's not like, is it Sean Connery or Roger Moore or whatever. But the idea is it's not meant to look like, Sean Connery or Roger Moore. It's meant to look like James Bond. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, the sort of this iconic version of the character, So yeah, but it's fun. I mean, I really did have a fun time with Bond. We've talked about maybe doing another one, and it depends on my workload. I've got some things are in flux at the moment, but there might be some big stuff happening, and so I've sort of 90% committed to it, but not 100%. I've asked them to kind of pause for a bit on that while I figure some stuff out. I've got various things I'm juggling at the moment. But it would be fun. I know what, if I do another Bond, I know what it would be. I've got the key to a good Bond story is you need a really good villain with a really good plan. And I've come up with that, and it's kind of like, okay, I know what he's doing, and I know why he's doing it, and how he's doing it, and I know how Bond is going to be a spanner in the works. So it would be fun to do. So hopefully,
I assume this villain has a plan to make ketchup and mustard, available in every household. Not to say that's Condiment King, but it's definitely Condiment King. So yeah, we covered all your comics. So my last 3 questions. What is your dream comic book? If I said to you could work on any comic book character in the whole vast world, who's a character you'd love to write for? They haven't gotten a chance to yet.
I get asked that a lot because there's always this assumption that you get into comics because you want to write your favorite characters, but I've never really been like that. Like when I said earlier on about when I wasn't following Batman every month or Spider-Man every month. I was just jumping around between different things, always looking for novelty, So yeah, it's not like, I mean, I love Judge Dredd, but I don't want to write Judge Dredd particularly. I have written a bit of it, but it's not like I didn't get into it so that I could write him. I didn't get into comics so I could write Spider-Man or whatever. I mean, so. And you need to be that guy, that's why I wasn't the right guy to write Batman ongoing, but it's why Scott Snyder is the right guy, because it's in his blood, he lives and breathes Batman. He is the right guy for that job. So I do have stories. I mean, there's a Punisher story I really want to do.
Really?
But it would be very dark and very grim, and I'm not sure that, like, I really like Garth's Punisher Max stuff.
My dad
very,
does as well.
very dark. But I don't think that's the kind of thing they're looking for these days. I've got a Batman Joker story I would love to do one day, but that's now is not the time for that. There's too much other stuff going on, but one day maybe. Again, I'm not sure the way things are going at DC. Again, it's a very dark story that's about some pretty serious stuff, and I'm not sure that that's the direction they want to move in. But I'm sort of keeping one ear vaguely to the ground on that. But I haven't pitched it because it didn't seem like the right time. But
Black Label. They've been doing some Black
maybe.
Label. So,
I'm kind of curious to see what happens with Black Label since all these changes at DC. I know there's been a lot of flux in the background. A lot of good people no longer there. So we'll see. I get the sense that they're going to want to be a little bit more sort of family friendly. With their stuff. So we'll see. And it's not like I'm saying I want to put lots of gratuitous violence in it or anything, but it's about the idea I have for a story is about some fairly dark subject matter, although hopefully handled intelligently.
I can see.
But but most of the time, like when my inspiration comes to me, it's usually like it's not based on some other character. It'll be something original, But I'm thinking what I ought to do. Some of these ideas I'm having, I'm turning into prose, like. Started writing a fantasy novel, got something else. I keep jumping around, but probably won't ever get anything finished. But I've got all these stories I want to tell, but they don't have comic characters in them. I've got a supernatural thriller. I've got like several fantasy things. There's a crime revenge story, an espionage story. I've got all these stories I want to tell, but I'm just not sure that they're comics.
Yeah.
I feel as I get older, I'm wanting to kind of try something new. You know, I feel like I've been maybe stuck in a rut for a while, and I want to just get out of my comfort zone a little bit and try stretching some different writing muscles. You know.
Yeah, I could definitely see you on a Punisher book. Like my dad loves the Garth Ennis stuff, so yeah, you'd be great for that. But my second last question: have you noticed improvement as a writer? Like, do you look back at some of your earlier work and said, "Oh, I could have done this," or "Oh, I found out more about how to do this better," or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. But like I say, I tend not to reread my old stuff, but I do kind of look back. I probably should. I probably should go back and reread my stuff and see if and how I've improved. But I just kind of, I assume that I would go back and look at it and go, oh my God, this is so terrible. I should just quit. But I'm kind of aware of, at least I hope I have improved somewhat over the years. One thing that I think I'm better at now is, well, not better. Better's not the right word. I find that I want to let the characters talk more now. Now, that's not necessarily a strength, because comics are all about brevity. You know, you have to just condense everything down. And I used to be very good at condensing everything down. And now I found that I don't want to. I want to just let the characters talk. And that's not necessarily appropriate for comics. I hate comics with giant speech balloons. So that's another reason why I'm thinking maybe these things want to be novels rather than graphic novels. You know what I mean? So whether that means it's better or worse, I think my dialogue might have improved. I mean, like the first things I ever wrote never saw print. The first thing I wrote a screenplay back in 1996 that I never showed to anybody, you know, apart from a couple of friends, you know, and it was bloody awful because I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to write. I just didn't know what I was doing. But then, you know, working editorially, getting kind of, you know, like that was a crash course, and you know, taking classes and all the rest of it. I did before I pitched planned to pitch 2008. I did evening classes in script writing. So yeah, I think I kind of gradually improved over the years, and there's lots of little tricks of the trade you pick up, you know. But as I get older, I kind of like I'm feeling a little stale, and I'd like to try new things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so my last and final question, if anyone's looking to get into comics, what advice would you have for them? To the millions watching.
If you want to get into comics, my advice is just go make them. Do not wait for permission, you know?
Yeah.
No, you don't need anybody's permission to go make a comic. All you need is a pencil and paper, you know? So just go make your own stuff. Like one of the most successful web comics is like XKCD, which is just stick figures, you know? But it's got this huge viewership and this huge fan base, and they make loads of money selling merch. You know, and they're literally stick figures, you know.
Yeah.
You don't need to work for Marvel or DC to make comics. And if you want to do that, that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable goal to work towards. But, you know, look at like Raina Telgemeier, right? She's like the most successful graphic novelist in the United States. Her books sell millions. She's always top of the bestseller lists. But you walk into your average comic shop, you're not going to see, you know, because the direct market is kind of separated out from you know, the wider world of people reading comics. So you know, there's no one right way to do it. There's no one right way to get in. There's no one right kind of comic. Do what you love. If you want to make comics, just go and make them. You know, you can stick them on the web, you can photocopy them and hand them out to people. And the secret is, the question is not how do I get into the comics industry? The question is, how do I get good enough at making comics that the comics industry will come looking for me?
Yeah.
And the answer to that question is you get good at it by doing it. It's like playing the guitar. You know, nobody's born being good at playing the guitar. You just got to practice and practice and practice until you're good at it. And the only way to get good is to just make lots of terrible comics. And what you'll find is that they'll get better and better the more you do it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's really great. Thank you guys so much for watching. Andy, I'm so sorry for taking up so much of your time. Thank you all so much for watching. Go check out Andy's work. Andy, are you on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as Andy Diggle, or one word. That's where I waste my time when I should be working.
And I believe you have a website as well.
I do, but it's 20 years old and terrible, so don't look at it.
Is there any new projects you'd like to promote or talk about? Anyone can check them out.
Like I say, I've got a couple of things on the go. I'm not allowed to talk about them. I'm under kind of NDA contracts where they will. If I talk about them, they'll send ninjas after me.
Yeah, there's a sniper outside. Is there? I see
yeah,
it on your
exactly.
head.
Got a laser dot on my head.
Yeah,
no, there's a couple of things. One is a comic and one, but I'm not allowed to say what they are. Sorry.
No problem. You know, there's millions watching this. You just let down 1 million people. So, you know, it's the sacrifices we make for our art, I suppose. But thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out Andy on Twitter. That's Andy Diggle. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Go donate to National Death Children's Society. I'll have a link for that in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. Andy, I'll talk to you a little bit after this recording. Thank you guys so much for watching. Go check out Andy's work, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.